November 14, 1965, Landing Zone X-ray, Ia Drang Valley, Central Highlands, South Vietnam. At 10:48 a.m., First Lieutenant James Riley tried to steady his trembling hand as he wrote in his field notebook. The battle had erupted minutes after the helicopters lifted off. "My rifle saved my life," he wrote, "but 3 men died because theirs wouldn't fire." 14 miles west of Pleiku's Plaimi camp, soldiers from the U.S. 1st Cavalry Division, Airmobile, had just engaged in their first major fight with regular North Vietnamese troops. About 450 men from Lieutenant Colonel Harold Moore's 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, were airlifted into a small clearing beneath the Chu Pong Massif. Within minutes, they were battling the North Vietnamese Army's 66th Regiment in what became a brutal 3-day clash. The newly issued M16 rifle, rushed into service with promises of superior firepower, performed flawlessly for some soldiers but failed catastrophically for others. No one realized it yet, but the M16's early failures would become one of the worst equipment scandals in U.S. military history, eroding troop confidence and costing countless lives before Congress finally intervened. The disaster didn't begin in the jungle, it started in Washington boardrooms. Eugene Stoner's original AR-15 design had been revolutionary, lightweight, accurate, and high velocity, firing a small 5.56 mm round that allowed soldiers to carry more ammunition and shoot effectively on automatic. After successful trials, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara halted M14 production in 1963 and ordered mass production of the M16. But cost-cutting and rushed decisions sabotaged the weapon. The first major mistake was changing the gunpowder. Stoner's design used DuPont's IMR 4475, which burned cleanly and matched the rifle's gas system. When DuPont couldn't produce enough, the Army switched to Olin's WC-846 ball powder, cheaper but dirtier and far more corrosive. It increased chamber pressure, firing rate, and carbon fouling, blowing grime back into the action. The new ammunition was never properly tested before being issued. The second critical error was the decision to skip chrome plating the rifle's chamber and bore. Stoner and Colt engineers warned that chrome plating was essential to prevent corrosion in Vietnam's humidity. The Army rejected the idea to save time and money, assuming regular cleaning would suffice. It didn't. Corrosion and fouling led to countless jammed rifles in battle. To make matters worse, Colt marketing falsely promoted the M16 as self-cleaning. Troops were issued rifles with little training and no cleaning kits, some were even told that cleaning could damage the weapon. Once combined with dirty powder and unplated chambers, disaster followed. Another controversial change worsened the situation. The Army insisted on adding a forward assist, a button designed to manually close the bolt when it failed to lock. Stoner had intentionally omitted it, arguing that forcing a faulty bolt could make the problem worse. The Army overruled him, believing soldiers needed a manual override. In practice, troops often slammed the forward assist on jammed rifles, worsening the fouling problem. When the first M16s arrived in Vietnam in early 1965, elite units like Special Forces and the 1st Cavalry Division praised the rifle, because they had the correct IMR 4475 ammunition and proper maintenance support. At Ia Drang, Lieutenant Colonel Moore's battalion fought ferociously with M16s that worked perfectly. Lightweight rifles and high ammunition loads gave American troops a major edge, allowing them to repel waves of attackers. Sergeant Ernie Savage later recalled that his M16 never jammed once during the fight. But that early success masked the disaster ahead. As the war expanded in 1966 and hundreds of thousands of M16s were shipped to ordinary units, now using only WC-846 ammunition and minimal training, the rifle's flaws emerged. Reports flooded in of constant jamming. Soldiers begged families to send cleaning rods. After a few magazines, fouling built up in the chamber, causing empty cases to stick. When the extractor tried to pull them out, it often ripped through the rim, leaving the casing jammed. The rifle locked up entirely. Without a rod, soldiers couldn't clear it, many died helpless, trying to unjam their rifles during firefights. Letters home revealed their desperation. One Marine wrote that his rifle jammed 10 times in 40 shots. Others carried grenades or captured AK-47s instead, saying they trusted enemy weapons more than their own. By late 1966, entire units had lost faith in the M16. Some soldiers secretly used AK-47s because they knew they would fire under any condition. The contrast was striking. The AK-47's piston-driven system and loose tolerances kept it running in mud, sand, or water. Dirt simply fell out of the rifle. Even neglected or buried for months, an AK would still fire. American troops saw enemy rifles pulled from swampy holes and used immediately, while their own M16s jammed after a few bursts. The enemy had better rifles than we did, one soldier said bitterly. By late 1966, reports of mass weapon failures reached General William Westmoreland, commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam. Once a strong advocate for the M16, he now faced evidence that it was costing American lives. A Marine Corps survey confirmed the scale of the crisis. Nearly 80% of troops reported jamming in combat, often after firing fewer than 10 rounds. Some accounts were heartbreaking. One Marine, the only man with a cleaning rod, ran between foxholes clearing jammed rifles until he was shot and killed, his own rifle still functional beside him. By early 1967, letters from soldiers describing fatal rifle malfunctions appeared in newspapers. Families demanded answers. On March 26, the Washington Daily News published a front-page exposé, sparking outrage. How could the military send soldiers into battle with defective rifles? Congress responded. On May 3, 1967, Representative L. Mendel Rivers formed a subcommittee led by Congressman Richard Icord, the Icord Committee. It launched one of the most extensive weapons investigations in U.S. history. The findings were damning. The committee traced the disaster to a chain of bureaucratic failures and ignored warnings. Switching to untested WC-846 powder. Rejecting chrome-plated chambers. Spreading the false self-cleaning claim. Sending rifles to war without cleaning kits or training. Testimonies from engineers, officers, and soldiers proved that every failure was preventable. Stoner explained that the M16 was designed as a complete system, changing the ammo without testing broke that system. Colt and Army memos confirmed that officials knew about the problems but continued shipments to meet quotas and budgets. By October 1967, the committee issued a scathing report naming the ammo switch as the main cause, lack of chrome plating as the second, and poor maintenance and training as the third. It demanded immediate corrections. The improved XM16E1, standardized as the M16A1, was introduced in 1967 with key fixes, chrome-plated chambers and bores, a redesigned buffer to slow the firing rate, and proper maintenance instructions. Cleaning kits were distributed, manuals rewritten, and that self-cleaning myth publicly debunked. The results were immediate. With proper ammo, cleaning, and chrome plating, the M16A1 became one of the most reliable rifles in service. Surveys in 1968 showed 85 to 98% soldier satisfaction. Malfunctions became rare, and the M16 regained trust on the battlefield. Yet the cost of that success was enormous, hundreds of preventable deaths caused by poor decisions made far from the front lines. But those sacrifices forced change. The M16 crisis redefined U.S. military procurement. Congress established real oversight, soldier feedback became mandatory, and equipment testing under combat conditions became standard procedure. Manufacturing flaws could no longer be ignored. Every new weapon had to be tested as a full system, with reliability prioritized over cost. 2 decades later, in 1985, veterans of IA Drang reunited in Texas. Many remembered the chaos of the early M16's. Former Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, who fought from 1967 to 1968, said it best, the early M16 was a death trap. We knew it. We reported it. Men died while officials argued about costs. But when they fixed it, the M16A1 was the best rifle I ever carried. The lessons learned went beyond one weapon. They reshaped how the U.S. military buys, tests, and maintains all its arms. The M16 story is both a tragedy and a redemption, tragedy because lives were lost needlessly, and redemption because the failure was confronted, investigated, and corrected. The rifle that once symbolized bureaucratic incompetence became proof that accountability saves lives. The men who died with jammed rifles paid for those lessons with their blood, but because of them, future soldiers carried weapons they could trust. The M16 story endures as a warning and a legacy. When leaders listen, when truth is faced, and when failure drives reform, tragedy can still lead to progress.